Hi there. Welcome to another presentation of the Globe Sound Healing Conference. Now we have Randy Masters. Hi, Randy.
Hey, David. All right.
We've known
Welcome
each
to.
other. We've known each other a long time, huh?
Yeah, what 30 some years that I've been
Wow.
teaching. Yeah, I don't remember the total, 33 probably.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Wow. Okay, Randy has a BA in music, film, master's, and PhD in divinity, and is a multidisciplined alchemist, an award-winning composer, a professional musician, and multi-instrumentalist, proficient in piano, trumpet, guitar, bass, and percussion. He is a former university music teacher at UCSC and San Jose State University, as well as several junior colleges. He's a wellness facilitator for sound healing, spiritual counseling, Regenesis, and Universal White Time. He combines his expertise as a composer with several record albums and feature music scores. He performed and recorded with several artists, including jazz leader Cal Jader, salsa master Tito Puente, and also guitarist Bob Brosman and Martin Taylor. He performed and composed for Charlie Bird, the guitarist, in the African music group Head Zola Sounds, and was on KQED TV as well. Randy is also a harmonic polymath with a background
Yeah.
with a background in esoteric and exoteric sciences to reveal the precise harmonics of our universal life field. He's an international lecturer, author, and well-known specialist in his field, often sought out for his expertise in many projects. He's an in-depth researcher on the pyramids, sacred sites, and mathematical language of light and the harmonics of sacred numbers. He's led immersive tours to Egypt to learn about the mysteries and technologies, and his Not So Mystery School in Aptos, California, features weekend intensives on subjects of sacred geometry, tuning forks, sound and music, and ancient esoteric studies. Take a tour through his site, universalsong.net, and you may never come back.
Yeah, you can escape the matrix through that.
Right, right, right. What have you been up to lately?
Well, even preparing for today to take, all these years that I've been studying things and, condense it down to a few bullet points took a few days
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
thinking about what's important. And I mean, I went through stuff that I've done and forgot that I did. Woo, polymath. Woo,
Uh-huh.
you know, that kind of thing, right?
I know that.
Would be doing that. But I enjoy that. Every time I do it, I make discoveries. Every time I review my notes, I start thinking of something that I did 20, 30 years ago, and all of a sudden I get an idea of look at it in a different way. And that's very exciting because it just keeps expanding
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
expanding. So I get
It's
higher,
real
you know.
it's really interesting. I always think of, you know, it took me years before I could explain you.
Thank you. Probably I'll catch up. I will catch up.
But it's like first of all you got a memory that remembers everything, so you've got more data in your head, but it's really about how sound, geometry, color, and light, every vibration in the universe all work together to create the matrix within which we live and we are a part of.
That's the idea. All of that is united, the dots connect, and helping people connect the dots and feel more connected to a really connected universe. It is, in spite of some disconnected behaviors that we often observe.
Right, right, right. Okay, with all of this, you probably have how would you change the world? I mean, what if you had all the money in the world? What would you do to help people?
Well, I would certainly give much away to help people along the way that maybe didn't get a break, and mainly focus on helping people who want to escape the matrix, to
Mhm.
get out of the controlled matrix of the field, whatever you want to call that field, whatever science terms you want for it, and that type of thing. I believe that's part of what real ascension is.
Mhm.
Not to ascend to a place where there's more controls and things, but to be liberated from that.
It's often about just thinking your own thoughts and really, really figuring things out with intuition and your own thought processes and recognizing when there's a pattern running from
Yeah.
society.
and not to believe your thoughts. A lot of people get drunk on their thoughts in space,
Uh-huh.
like
Uh-huh.
if it means something that
Yeah.
that they've assigned to it that isn't indigenous to creation, right?
That's yeah, when you become, there's so many people that, especially even in the sound healing field that are so attached to their perspective and but we know nothing. We know nothing, right? There's so little
Or
we
the
know.
wake up to realize what you don't know and be able to handle that.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Really,
And be open to new paradigms or new ways that of thinking that will actually have a much wider, more grounded perspective in the reality that's not reality.
I often carry 2 dimes in my pocket, so I'm ready for the paradigm.
Oh, God. Okay, okay, fine.
All
Okay.
right, I'll get
Uh,
serious.
okay. So, um, so, oh, so what are you going to be talking about today?
Basically, the relationship in sound and math and sacred geometry and how that is in nature, showing that the musical coherence, numerical coherence is found in nature.
Hmm.
That's really the basis of true sacred geometry, not necessarily something that was machined with human, let's say, mechanical tools, but nature out there is just full of all these ratios showing us how it works. And what humans have done, like Leonardo da Vinci and others, was pay attention to nature, and all of their designs and things that they built was a reflection of what they paid attention to, not making it up or learning it in a university that tells you what things should be that they want taught, but by absolutely observing. And that's why Da Vinci and people spend a lot of their years studying Da Vinci, because it's just full of all these patterns. And he
It's
spent
re
a lot of
it's
years of his life, most of them trying to figure out the flower of life,
uh-huh.
you know?
It's interesting. I just was thinking about this probably in preparation. Oh, just last week, and not even knowing what you were gonna be going over. And I was just thinking about how there's the world of sound and or just vibration, uh, which is really kind of numbers, but also music and sound. And then there's the world of geometry. And it's interesting because geometry is normally way so complex that the left brain can't handle it. But when you really dive into it, it actually is logical and mathematical, just like everything. But it's basically so much that the left brain shuts down and the right brain takes over and goes, patterns are patterns, right?
Yeah, that right brain, well, the whole brain, the left brain working. I mean, I use both parts,
Hmm.
I have to do the kind of detail things with numbers and looking at the insights in numbers and prime numbers within the numbers. And you think that's all left brain stuff, but it isn't. It's creative when you get the right brain in there and seeing how the patterns are working. It's very creative. It's not like I'm stuck in my left brain or something,
It's
where
like
everybody would fall asleep.
it feels like the at the essence, it's really getting into the mind of God.
That's exactly where I'm coming from with it. The divine or the creator of all that is, that I usually use that expression. You know, uh, there's a lot to go with this, and the deeper you go into it, there isn't a bottom.
Uh, okay,
You got to
so
be comfortable floating and going deeper and deeper and deeper. And then what happens when you're going down the rabbit holes? You look to the left and right and front and back and around, and there's other tunnels that go out from and they're really partying. All these rabbits are down there.
That's a rabbit party.
That is
Okay.
absolutely.
Okay. Well, it's interesting because when I think of geometry, I mean, the first thing I think of that I've learned from you is the relationship of two sides of a geometry is a musical interval relationship. So if you got a triangle that's 3 by 2 on two sides, that's 3 to 2 ratio, which is a musical fit. But you really, it, but and from that perspective, you have to assign a frequency to one of the sides randomly. There's no definite frequency since a length could be any frequency, although
Any
technically it
unit
could,
you want.
Yeah,
It's just the
yeah,
proportion of the units you're choosing to assign to it.
yeah, yeah. It's ratios and relationships more than
Yeah.
one-to-one frequencies.
Well,
Although there are some frequencies. Go ahead. Yeah.
one of the bottom lines I want people to understand here's that these ratios expressed in whole numbers is what's really going on in nature, not square roots. I don't have any square roots in my garden, you know. Yeah, maybe some vegetables too. I don't know. But anyway,
Had square root for dinner last night.
yeah, that's it, boy. But it's the fact that that's whole numbers, whole numbers like the amount of leaves per limb turning at a certain ratio that are always Fibonacci numbers, like 5 leaves to 3 turns and all that kind of stuff. It's called phyllotaxis. And what happens, that's so that all the different leaves get equal sunlight. So the whole math, they're not just randomly shooting out off of the stems and the limbs and all of that stuff. There's a specific math to how they come off of the different limbs on a tree and roots and that type of thing. So that's pretty brilliant of the creator to make sure they all get light and they're
So
not
that
fighting, they're not competing. And
so there's no decimal points in the way that spiral is coming off of the branches
right.
coming up, right?
Oh,
It's
yeah,
all
like you
whole
could
numbers.
divide 5 by 3 and get 1.66666, right? But count the leaves, count the turns, whole numbers. And that gets rid of the decimals. Yet they're there if you want to convert it by dividing, and doing that type of thing.
That's really interesting. I've never thought about how God likes whole numbers more than decimal points in a way. In
Well,
certain areas, certain
it
areas.
came to me after 40 some more years doing this and seeing whole numbers showing up everywhere. And then I finally got to a place where I'm seeing them as musical ratios that I find in music. Maybe it hasn't become music yet, but these are the ratios found in music throughout the history of humanity as we know it,
Mm-hmm. Uh-huh.
including way back, hundreds of thousands of years ago with different ancient civilizations, Anunnakis and things like that, who built pyramids with specific math and numbers and ratios in them. And so I began to see the universe, the physical universe, let's say, musically, because I see these ratios. And
Right.
that is one of the biggest points I would like people to get.
So just as an overview to give people a really clear idea of this, one of the first things you brought to me years ago was a set of chimes that
Mm-hmm.
has been based on the ratio of all the different sides of the triangles within the Shriantra.
Right. I still fortunately have one of those. I'm
Uh-huh.
not making those now, but I kept one for myself. Pat Flanagan and others got those. And exactly. So you could hear the Shriantra, which, for people just real quick here we go.
Uh-huh.
All right.
Nice.
And you've got what's important about this makes the point. If I were going to just choose one image to make my point, I could choose this image, which has been around in India for over 10,000 years. There's Shriantras all over India, including Shriantras that are in 3 dimensions, like this layer cake.
Hmm.
If I ever did another wedding ceremony, this is the way I would have the cake. I mean, wow, cool. And you look down on it like this, and you'll see the interlocking triangles of the Shriantra. And there's some temples in India, I don't remember where they are right this moment, that are designed off this, like big temple that's a big time Shriantra, or Sri Chakra, that they also call it that.
Mhm.
But I've studied this in depth. And this particular image was taken off of the computer from Pat Flanagan when Sai Baba came to him in a dream. And Pat had been working this out for years and couldn't get it right.
In
And
the
there's a lot of
computer.
different ways of drawing this, by the
Yeah,
way.
he couldn't get it right in the computer.
Yeah, like years working like 16 hours a day. And, he was pretty much could do what he wanted to do with his time. And Sai Baba came to him in a dream with a blackboard or a whiteboard, I don't know, and drew it and gave the numbers. And then he put it in his computer and measured it all. I took all those measurements and converted them into sound to make that chime.
And then
which is
I know
really big fun. And then
yeah.
you get somebody with a metal plate, let's say, with sand or iron filings on it or whatever, and something that they speak into that vibrates the plate. And all those metal filings or sand can form a Shriantra,
Mhm.
but not for everybody, because you have to have the right consciousness to put the right harmonics into your voice, so that when you do that, the right harmonics make the plate vibrate to create the Shriantra. You give a whole classroom full of students the microphone and setup to do this, and they're all doing ohms or whatever they want to do, and might not be any Shriantras formed
Mhm.
unless they had their consciousness created the right harmonics that show up in their voice when they do ohm.
And of course, there's all those images. If you look online, and I've seen presentations where they take the patterns, the cymatic patterns that are created in the sand and such, that are exactly patterns that are of like the top of a tortoise shell or many things in nature. So that,
Absolutely. Yeah.
hmm hmm
Well, and the cymatic patterns are all over the place in nature, in trees and plants and you name it, right down through the atomic structure. So with this one, the two of the most famous triangles that people study, one is a cross section of the Giza pyramid, going from the middle of the base up to the apex and the slopes. And let's say we'll make a, a right angled triangle out of that. If the half the base will equal 1, the height is the square root of phi, 1.272. Okay, that's non-rational on the most perfect level. And then the slope will be phi of 1.618. And it makes a perfect right angle triangle mathematically doing that. Now, there's many different forms of analyzing a cross section of the Giza pyramid using different values of phi and pi, depending upon who measured it and all of that. But basically, that's what you get, is one of the most famous triangles. Then, now that's in the group of there's 9 construction triangles to make this. And then when they crisscross and intersect, it makes all these other smaller triangles, giving you 27. But it starts out with these 9, 4 up and 5 down, 2 different positions. Then when you take the 5 triangles, the largest of the 5, cut it in half, and it makes a 3, 4, 5 triangle, where 5 is the slope, 4 is the height, and 3 represents the base. And that includes the 3 prime numbers that start the primes, 2, 3, and 5. So 4 is just 2 squared, and then 3 and 5. And so many things in reality can be broken down into multiples of 2, 3, and 5. Most of the music systems in the world, in different tuning systems, ancient tuning systems and things, can be broken down into that. The ancient, so that's very important numbering. And
So
all,
I
yeah, yeah,
know 3 to 4 is a musical fourth,
right.
right? Is 5 to 3 a used
Yeah,
interval?
musical major sixth,
Oh, okay,
like
okay.
an A going down to a C, or a higher C going down to an E.
Uh-huh. So it'd
And
be like,
then you
ooh.
also get the major triad for NBC.
From the triangle?
Yeah,
Oh, okay, that's interesting.
yeah, 3, 5, 4. I mean, that was really cool. Yeah,
Huh. Wow.
but that's how important that is in those triangles. And when I did analysis of the Giza Plateau, using all the pyramids and the Sphinx and a couple of points, and I drew all the lines and connected all the pyramids and the Sphinx, the whole Giza pyramid is covered with right angle triangles,
Hmm.
meaning there's a right angle of 90 degrees and whatever the other angles are. And all over the plateau, which is pretty interesting harmonically. I wanted to do a ceremony sometime where everybody had like a chime or something tuned, and so they could do all those right triangles all with sound and sound them. I mean, you can
Hmm.
imagine what would happen,
Hmm.
if you sounded all those triangles. And a lot of them were Pythagorean triples, they call them. That meant that every side is a whole number. That's what they call Pythagorean triples. I have a list of all of them. I've looked at all of them musically, and then I assign the musical name of notes. Like in a 3-4-5 triangle, the 3 side would be a G, 4 would be a C, and the 5 side is an E at the purest level. It could be any other ratios that have that ratio, but built on different units, but at the smallest unit like that. And that's pretty exciting. I want to do some experiments, musical experiments, with what can happen with the right frequencies put into those right triangles, those Pythagorean triples.
So when you say right triangles, like with just any subsections of pyramids or different things in the and
Yeah, there could be, but getting a right triangle where, see, when you do square root of 5 and phi, square root of phi and 5, phi itself, phi, those are non-rational numbers in their purest form.
decimal points.
Yeah, and all of that, and they go on forever. But you can create that same basic proportions of the pyramid using whole numbers.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You know, that are just whole numbers. They aren't based on not on irrational numbers. So
I got something I want to show you. See what you think about this. So I've got here's the actual frequencies of the the actual resonances in the Great Pyramid. If you divide the feet into 1130, these are the actual frequencies you get for the resonances in the chamber,
mm-hmm.
which which actually, if you play them, creates a binaural beat between the 66 and the 59, which is almost exactly 7 hertz.
Yeah,
And I heard that when I was in there when I was toning it.
that's fantastic. And
Uh,
all of those, see, they're 34 is twice the 17. So the width of the king's chamber is, if that was 17, the length will be 34, and the
mhm.
diagonal cross section, or the height, will be 19 at the
That's right.
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 Then if you take the width and the length and the diagonal cross section from one corner across through the middle up high up the top of the one of the ends, you get a 3-4-5 triangle.
Huh.
Perfect 3-4-5 triangle built into the king's chamber design.
Which is not like, I mean, there's so many other possibilities. The fact that that's so precise to that is just really unusual, huh?
And yeah, and they're showing, you don't maybe see the diagonal. It's there because that would flow right through the room from the ceiling, across the room to the lower corner.
Mm-hmm.
But it's there when you take that measurement. So
Mm-hmm.
even though it's not completely visible to most, there it is built into the structure. The most famous right triangle of all is the 3-4-5 triangle.
Wow.
Everywhere.
It's really all about harmony, huh?
Absolutely. And some triangles create more harmony, whether it's a right triangle or not, based on different things, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how they interact together. It's pretty fantastic how all of that works. Even in the weather, there's these things called spherics, which are how the ionosphere and all of that works. I mean, it's interesting discussion. And the people that measured them originally did 31,000 measurements. And they got this list of spherics, which I have here. And the main thing with those spherics is the fundamental was 4150.84. That represents the first of this series, okay? And there's 7 of them, which is also interesting in the power of 7 playing out in our reality. And
So this is like the atomic level in our atmosphere.
yeah.
Okay.
And okay, so when you boil them all down, it forms this harmonic pattern: 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 27, 48. 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, then 27 and 48. Now, if that were a chord, instead of a B sharp, let's call it a C chord, it would be a C major 6 chord. 4 is C, G, the 6 is a G, the 8 is another C, the 10 is an E. So right there, 6, 8, 10 Divided in half is 3, 4, 5, right there. And then 12 is another G, 27 is an A, and 48 is another G. So it forms a C major 6 chord out of that. Very interesting. I don't know how that's being played with or what they're doing with that information, but 31,000 or so measurements all showing the same thing is pretty interesting. It's
This is what the way I actually uh, I point something out in class of what you taught me. And when you take these musical interval relationships between anything, which
yeah,
could be sides of a triangle, sides, it could be two uh, uh, plants or two planets or two souls or two anything, then you've got a musical interval feeling that you can take into your body as an emotion and feel what that relationship is about.
exactly. And
And,
everything. Once you have two, you've got some kind of a ratio between them. Even like your keyboard here on your right, you
mm-hmm,
know, the
mm-hmm.
ratio of the width of that to the length to the various depths up to the keys, up to the top, all of that stuff. And when
So
you did that, yeah,
I've found that my note of my metabolism is actually is a B flat actually, and I've actually been with people that are women that are Fs, which is what a musical fifth, right?
if the F is above the B flat, the fifth, and
Yeah,
if the F is
F
below,
above. Uh-huh.
mm-hmm.
So that was a nice relationship. Whereas, I had one relationship, I was and she was an A and I was a B flat. And
Major seventh there,
yeah,
yeah.
yeah, it's like a little dissonant, a little like I wants to go somewhere. But what she would do is she would pull up to the B flat and I would go down to the A and we would meet sometimes.
Well, there you go. Well, all of those ratios have different emotional meanings, tensions, lack of tension, harmony, dissonances throughout music. And when you begin to see these measurements showing up in various ways in nature, well, you've got those tensions. For instance, in the atomic structure there's in the crystal kingdom, there's 7 different kingdoms with 3 different shapes for each kingdom. I have pictures of that. And here's one of them, this 2 tetrahedrons pointing in opposite directions, not interpenetrating like a star tetrahedron. It's called a hexadeltahedron. These are equilateral tetrahedrons. All the edges are the same.
And a
One
three-sided bottom in the middle.
and a triangular bottom.
Uh-huh.
And imagine putting atoms at each of those vertices, and that's what you get. That's where the atomic lattice is in the atomic structure. Now this one's in quartz. I have another one I had made, and I divided the sides down the middle. Other than that, the outsides are the same. I divided all these down the middle, and you get a skinny type of double tetrahedron, which is one of the energy fields of light body Merkabahs that the Pleiadians used to travel in, and beings from Sirius. That's a little out there. All right.
Go for it.
Yeah, or just, you don't have to believe me, just consider it. Here, this is the first one I made like 30 years ago in nearly optical quartz. And here it is. See how they're 2 steeper tetrahedrons rather than the equilateral tetrahedrons like this.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. So I remember in class you had to spin that in 4 different directions
Right. I
at the
won't do
same
that now
time.
because it would take some time, and I wouldn't want
Uh-huh.
our listeners to spin out, right.
Yeah, we may lose them, huh?
Yeah, we got to kind of go carefully with and set it up right. But anyway, and I saw a photograph of this from Norman Milanovich's trip to Tibet, and they took a picture of one of these spinning, so it looks like cones spinning into the Himalayan mountains, and the apexes here was penetrating the mountain, literally going through the mountain, and that's the shape. and it was an electric blue-white, which is also the color of these Merkabahs. That's the specific color of them, which is all very interesting. So there's a lot going on with this type of thing. I think I was the first to put all of the angles and all the dimensions of this together publicly. But, there we are. And it's an extension of the atomic matrix of the atomic structures of the different crystal kingdoms. Music, the crystals as music with their ratios and their angles. I mean, when you put the angles, face angles of the different platonic forms together, you actually create a chord from at least the 5 main platonic forms. You create an F sharp dominant ninth chord.
So now you're talking about the angles of it as opposed to the length.
The face angles, right?
Yeah, instead of the lengths of the sides, which we've been talking about mostly.
Yeah, because you could change the lengths and still have the same angles.
Uh-huh.
So I often say angles and angels as bringers of light. You change the angle on something and you get a different information.
So if I have a triangle like this, then that angle is 90, and then this is going to be what? Like, if that's a right triangle.
You'd have a 30 degree up here and a 60 over in this part of it.
Uh-huh. So 30, 60, and 90. And
then 30
you
is a B, 60 is a B, and 90 is an F sharp. So that shows a B, and I did all of the platonics. Eric Rankin put out a couple of videos called Sonic Geometry that were basically showing that. He did a very good job with that aspect of sacred geometry just in the world of angles. Mm-hmm. And what those angles would be if you gave them hertz and then gave them the musical name to go with the hertz. Mm-hmm. It doesn't mean you're necessarily making music. It depends on how you sound it and how you put it together. But it's got all of those numbers in it. And I've gone through, and they're famous numbers, like the cube. Well, let's see, the tetrahedron, add them all up at 720. That's an F sharp. The cube, 2,160 total face angles. That's a C sharp. The cube, the octahedron, 1,440. That's an F sharp. So right there is 2 F sharps and a C sharp, making the F sharps mainly the root. The dodecahedron is a G sharp, 6,480 total angles. Well, that's a ninth of that chord. And 3,600 for the icosahedron, that's an A sharp. That's the major third. So now we've got an F sharp major ninth chord. And then you get the E with the you get an E sharp with the stellated dodecahedron, where you've got a pyramid coming off of each of the 5 pentagonal sides of 10,800 total degrees. So, I mean, this stuff goes on and on. It's very fun.
I just thought it would be nice to have a exhibition where you've got all these different geometries and you have a little speaker right next to them playing the actual chords that are that geometry as you walk through the exposition.
Hear it, and then also to convert it to color for all the different frequencies.
Oh, now we're going into a whole nother.
Yeah.
So how do you convert to color?
Well, the one I trust that's been used in science, not that I trust all of science, or maybe I only trust a little bit of science. When you look at things, I mean, wow, it's unbelievable. All the 180s that we get now, that when we were in physics classes, it doesn't count. It wasn't correct information. That's a real mind blower, But dividing the wavelengths into the speed of light in, nanometers per second, and then dropping, that makes sound way up in the trillions of hertz. And then just dropping it down by octaves so you get some comfortable octave that you want to explore or work with. And a lot of these ratios are for instance, they're in the color spectrum, like of the rainbow, which we have a chimes set for and tuning forks set for that in the Globe store. So they're dark red to the next red. There's 2 reds, is 1/3 pi, 1.047, etc. So take pi, whichever value you want that'll do that, and you get 1.047, and that's the ratio between the medium red and the darker red. And then there's other ones that'll go from let's say cyan blue to red, or you get a whole bunch of different phi ratios and all of that stuff in there. It's just incredible. The musical ratios are right there in the rainbow.
So it's like all the all of nature, including all of the galaxies, are this incredible symphony of harmony or not harmony. It's not, it's like from God's perspective, when it's not harmonious, it's still got its job.
Unless it's a useful dissonance in music that will end up being resolved or not.
Uh-huh.
How composers work with useful dissonances. They have to, otherwise it can be really boring. There's no tension to then release from that tension. All the main
Hmm.
composers are very aware of how to do that. They play a certain chord and how that resolves to another chord, and the tension release. And the tension release principle in sacred geometry as well, where you get a certain tension and here's something that resolves that. I was playing one of the things I hadn't put on my list. And I said, well, what's something everybody can relate to for today? And it's our temperature, our typical 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit, right?
Uh-huh.
So I took the DNA frequency and stepped it down a whole bunch of octaves. And when I multiplied that by 65 over 64, those are called super particular ratios, where the top number is 1 unit higher than the lower number. Like in 3 over 2, 3 is 1 unit higher than 2. Those are called super particular. So 65 over 64 is one of those. And it turns out to be 98.6074, and that's a repetan that goes on forever. But 98.6, then the next unit is 0. Looking at that and our temperature in our body as the DNA frequency, but I'm talking different units. I'm talking frequency of the DNA as my number, comparing that to the number for temperature of Fahrenheit. You see, I switched the units. Forget about what kind of unit it is. Just look at the numbers. And that's another way, without converting temperature to some other units, right? I just took the number. And the number talks to other numbers through number to number, regardless of the units.
It makes you happy when there's a synchronicity like that, huh?
Isn't it? Oh, well, I was playing and I thought, I got to come up, I got to have something new. And that happens every time we get together to talk like this, or I do things. Okay. Then I'm up for several days and nights working on things. And I end up discovering more and more for each little unit that I had from years ago. Maybe now, I mean, see, everybody can relate to that body temperature, I think, maybe not some of the reptiles, I don't know, whatever, they're cold-blooded. That's a different thing.
You know what? You're going to find this really. Just last week, I saw an article on Yahoo that said that the average body temperature is a little different now.
Yeah.
I forget what it said it is,
Well,
but
when you get it, send it to me, and I
okay,
will
okay.
amend this, and I will get a little tidbit to go with that. That's for sure. Now you
Uh,
got me going. Oh my gosh, you
yeah,
know,
because I mean, where this is really headed is is when you really sink into it, there's this profound amount of harmony and in relationships of everything in the whole universe. I mean, it's really unbelievable
yeah,
how much, because I mean, if it were random, there would not be these harmonies anywhere. It would be rare that you ever get a harmony, but it's only because there's a higher consciousness putting it together that you get the harmonies.
absolutely. I know what they did with Random House Publishing, all these famous books. Not getting any coherency
Yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah.
You know, I used to be on Lynn Claire Dennis's. She wrote the book The Pattern, and her big thick science book now is called The Marion, Mereon. In fact, she did this painting behind me that shows a torus in a sunflower with an octahedron coming apart. She did that painting for me years ago, and so a few years ago, she got John Reed to put 7.97 hertz into water, and they photographed it, and it made this 144 face crystal that she calls the Marion. That she saw that in her near-death experiences, going up in a balloon and having a near-death experience in the Alps and went too high, too fast, or whatever. And she saw these geometries, and ever since then, she's been trying to put this together. She's got all these heavy-duty mathematicians and scientists, and this whole thing called the Marion Foundation. And so, in fact, one of her main geometers was sitting on my couch modeling it in his computer as we were meeting. I thought that was pretty far out. So I was part of getting those numbers back when I was meeting with her, but I came up with, and this is where decimals might be important. At 7.97, it did the trick. It made the 144 phase crystal, which was also an electric blue with white in it, that same color as the plasma field. That's also important. I don't know that they measured the frequency of the blue or not. When I talk to her sometime, I want to check that out. But I did 7.971615. I added 4 more decimals to, 4 more numbers, digits to the right of the decimal. The question is, it didn't need that to create the 144 faces. All it needed to do was go to 2 decimal points, you see? But when we were doing things like taking a certain pyramid frequency and putting it into water and having the salt in the seawater drop to the bottom of the tank, desalinating it, we had to have 5 decimal points with that number. It did not happen until we reached 5 decimal points. So that doesn't mean it's just a bunch of left brain. It means there's some kind of fine quality in that window that you got to be right on target. Other times you can round things up and off and do all of that type of thing, and it might not matter. But sometimes it won't matter or create matter until you get the right whole frequency of that wavelength. So I have a great respect for decimal points, although I don't have to do them for everything. I can't print them all on a tuning fork, So I do a reasonable amount, 3 to 5 decimal points typically for that, and chimes and so on. But that gets very, very interesting. And that number is only based on primes 2, 3, and 4. I have a ton of research where the target numbers that I came up with were only built on multiples of 2, 3, and 4, right out of the 3, 4, 5 triangle.
So a prime is something that's based on 2. So what would be example
a prime
of a
is a number that can only be divided by itself and 1. 2 is a weird number because, there isn't anything else. But 5 is only divided by 5 and 1. I mean, so you don't get any decimals.
So we're talking like 15
Yeah,
or
it's
10.
3 times 5. So the number 15 is a product of 2 primes, you see?
I got it. Okay.
Whereas 44, one of the water frequencies, is built on 2 squared times 11. You can square the primes too, a squared prime. And 66, one of the other water frequencies, is prime 3 times 11 times 2. No 5 in that one. Sometimes you don't get a 5. Sometimes it's only 2 and 3. Sometimes it's, look at the King's Chamber. What is that? 17, that's a prime. The length, 34. 2 times 17. And 19 for the height, that's its own prime. You see? And those are, now, a scientist from England just marked
when you say it's prime, it can't be divided by
evenly. Yeah.
Evenly.
You divide anything into anything you want, and still get a whole number without decimal points.
I got it.
I mean, if you divide 2 into 3, you get 1.5. Now you've got a decimal. Right? That type of thing. Or you could express it as 2.5. No decimals. That's part of the understanding in ancient Egypt, is they converted the things that would be in decimals all to whole numbers, which is a fantastic way to understand their thinking and how they design things. That I love that.
While we're talking about it though, there's, in a lot of the major temples and churches, they use the actual ratios are not they ended up with ratios that are really uh, like the golden mean, right?
But the golden mean can be expressed as a ton of whole numbers.
Oh, okay. Okay. So it's not the actual
It's not what,
difference, it's the actual two numbers that create the ratio
right.
that are whole numbers.
1.618, 1.61, all of that type of thing. 81 over 50, 1.62. That's the phi ratio that's found in the spectral lines of hydrogen, which I
Uh-huh.
discovered. And
Uh-huh.
I like that one, 81 over 50. There's no more decimals. And I use that a lot. Here's an example of applying that. And this is two different lessons in one object here, right, for now. I designed the containers for the Spring Life company, and it's full of minerals, and it reverses the spin of toxic substances. The length of this rectangle is 7.23 centimeters. Okay. And then you divide that by phi and you get the width. Then I take this and use the length of this to be the width of this one. So the 7.23 centimeters is here times phi. And on this, I use like 1.62 because it's a musical phi. It's not some number that goes on forever. And then I clip it,
Mhm.
which doesn't really, how all that works. And then you put the two together, and you've got a square root of 5 rectangle. Okay. This is the golden section here, this top part, the small one. And I put that over the larger rectangle. And now I've got a square with a little golden section added to the square to make a larger golden rectangle. So I designed a whole series of these in different sizes, spiraling up by 5, but yet in these proportions, all built on this length. Why did I choose that? Because when the Bell scientists examined the cosmic background radiation throughout space, everywhere they looked, they found 7.23 centimeters. Now that I would consider that to be the ohm wavelength,
Mhm.
which doesn't create a C sharp either. But that would be the ohm. What wavelength is everywhere they looked? That was it, 7.23 centimeters. Now I have a version of that with more decimals because of how I created it.
What are some examples of the 7.23
Well,
in the that they found? What
everywhere they looked at the cosmic background radiation and what are the wavelengths of that radiation.
is that radiation coming from other galaxies?
Yeah, it's all, well, I don't know how far out they went.
Uh-huh.
Everywhere in space that they could go with their equipment. Now, how far out beyond
Uh-huh.
our solar system, I'm not sure how far they could go. But I would say
So
at least in our solar system. Plus, the distances between our major and minor chakras on average is 7.23 centimeters. You go
uh,
down to the throat, go down a couple more times to the heart. This is a unit built into our bodies.
well,
Basically, we're different heights and things, so there's a little bit of variances in, but basically this. So
mhm.
that's why I built these rectangles on that fundamental because it's
Oh,
found everywhere, you see.
I got it.
And a lot of the things in the pyramids were built on different fundamentals, which I've spent, 40 years or so studying. What are the fundamentals that whoever built the pyramids, Egyptians, others, Anunnaki, you name it, whatever, how far in history you could deal with it, they had certain basic units that they used, like the life force itself converts to R 25 inches, the
Mm.
wavelength, which is 63 point, well, there's a lot of different measurements of that. 63.52, 63.61725 is the one that we used in our research. And then convert that to inches, and you got basically 25 inches, right?
I've got
So I
I,
use that in my building designs,
oh, cool.
you see.
I, I've got something that I wanted to ask you if it's a good time about the music of the Taurus.
Phi ratios. The earliest measurement I came upon for the torus was the diameter of the hole in the middle is 5 to the 6th smaller than the diameter of the outside.
Okay. Okay.
Phi,
So it's
phi,
interesting.
5 times phi, and the perfect part of the spiral of a golden spiral. Golden means spiral.
Well, it's interesting, because, there's different levels. You got frequencies, you got timbres, which is combinations of frequencies, you got relationships between frequencies, then you have flow, which is music, right? Which is rhythm and melody. So when you add time.
Hopefully, hopefully.
Yeah, right, right. So I was thinking, okay, what is the tempo of the flow in a torus?
I think it can vary for
Right.
different
And
kinds of spins
and there's different
because it's a
size
standing wave,
toruses.
right?
What's
And
that?
it's a standing wave. The whole idea of the torus keeps
Uh-huh.
going. Let me
Uh-huh.
show you one. Let me show you a good torus.
Oh, you got
So
rain.
you see that diameter multiplied by 5⁶ will give you the outside diameter.
Wow.
Now on this one, then you got a golden mean spiral in there.
Uh-huh.
And as I turn it, I'm trying to watch you. You can see that spiral unfolding different ways. But what I really like about this particular thing is that there are 7 different colors I've read out of the rainbow on the outside, made of cloth. And every one of those shapes of the color, they're all identical. And all
I'm
7,
sorry, every one of those what?
every one of these patches of cloth
Uh-huh.
are identical. Like you have a little model of it and you cut the cloth to meet that model, then you stitch it all together.
I see.
Okay. And every one of those touches the other 6. So when I do this, you know, so that green is touching the blue, it's touching the red, it's touching the violet.
Mm,
And as
mm.
I keep going over here on this part, the green is touching the yellow. And it basically it touches and it touches the orange here. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Every single one of these patches of cloth touches at some point all of the other colors.
I still want to, I
That's
still,
called topology, part of
I
topology.
see. Oh, that's really, really amazing. The
Now, this
synchronicities
is not
are,
an astrological sign now, folks, and it's not a
so
Ford, you
I,
know.
s- I still, not only do I'm kind of on a mission to find the song of the flow of the Taurus,
Nice.
but also, I interviewed Bruce Lipton. He said that at the atomic level, there's a vortex that's spinning, and there's now a light microscope where you can measure the spin of that vortex. So it's got a certain frequency in its spin.
Absolutely.
Uh,
I'd like to know that. I don't know what that frequency is. I'd like to get that frequency and take a look at that.
and here's another one that I just saw that I don't know if I just read that just last week that the matter goes in and out of reality 600 billion times per second.
Mm-hmm.
Have you
Talk
heard
about,
that?
yeah, that's very interesting in terms of timelines and things.
It's like the fastest frequency we know of,
Yeah,
right?
right.
And
So what?
I
It can
think
blink off or on, and it's always blinking off and on.
600 billion times a second. That's unbelievable. And I figure, would different types of matter and even thoughts actually be a different frequency that blink on and off at different times or
I think
different
so.
rates?
And if
Uh,
certain thoughts blink on long enough, it can create problems or miracles, depending on what you
Tell
know,
us more about that one.
right? I mean, it's standing waves, and
Uh-huh.
is it fixed, or is it growing? Is it flexing with reality, or is it fixed and it's not able to respond by shape shifting to reality by being like frozen?
Yeah. Well, I assume that at that level, consciousness and matter have merged. And so that when you have a thought, that changes that matter right there.
Yeah.
That's
So what's keeping the matter in the appearance of being solid And each time you look at it, mostly until you change in some profound way, it still looks the same, you know, whatever object you're looking at. Something in the thoughts is remaining constant enough for it to look the same way the next time you blink and look. But you could change something in your thoughts, and all of a sudden the matter shapeshifts. I mean, they teach people who walk through walls, and the CIA does this, how to do that, how to
Uh-huh.
blink off and on and go through matter, having to do, well, that's a whole other training, you know.
Oh,
Don't listen to
can
this
we
while
learn
you're
that in
driving.
the next? Yeah, can we learn how to do that in 5 minutes?
Yeah, no, not really. You know, because you got to know how to get back.
Right, right.
That's the
Yeah,
trick.
you don't
You
want to
don't
get
want to
stuck.
walk through and you don't get back like some of the people on the Philadelphia experiment did on the
Got
that ship.
stuck in the walls.
Yeah, or disappeared completely. Both.
Yeah,
You know,
yeah.
that was quite a thing. They overdid it there without having the training to gear up on it slow enough to know how to control it, and turned it up to full and created some big time ripples in space time.
So and that's, basically the contraption of the King's Pyramid and the sarcophagus, right? Is to really take you into another dimension based on the relationships of all these frequencies to set you up into a state where you can go to another dimension.
And to open up portals between here and other star systems like Andromeda and Sirius. They
Mm,
had very specific places to go when they opened up the field into
mm,
the Tauruses,
hmm.
down in the earth and out, and to train people how to deal with that so they
I
don't
went
freak out. So they don't freak
When I
out.
was toning the resonant frequency of the sarcophagus, I went down in the earth underneath the pyramid, and there was a guy guarding a door, and he said, I said, "Can I come in?" He said, "Your consciousness is not high enough," and I'm like, "Shit." Right.
Oh, yeah.
About a half hour later, the tourist cleared out, and he opened the door, and I was toning the frequency of the sarcophagus while I was in it. And then this energy, which was like information, flew up my spine and changed me drastically.
Yeah, wow, that's great. You didn't have to say DoorDash, so he would open up the door. Right. That's the magic word. What
Yeah.
is the key to the kingdom here? But I mean, there's a lot of stuff with opening those portals. When I toned in the sarcophagus, and there's only one other person in the room while I did that, um, the lights in the pyramids totally all the electricity went out.
Wow.
And this was before the sun came up in the day. All the electricity went out, and the ceiling was coated with that electric blue light.
Wow.
That was fun. I wasn't trying to do anything. Of all the things I might think I would try to do, I didn't. I was just toning like you tone, just get in the room and go into the zone through toning. And that's just what I was doing. I just wanted a pure experience of that without referencing to any of my tuning for any of that. Just toning, see where my voice would go. And then the electricity came on later, and they was talking about, well, what happened there? Something happened. you
Huh.
know, I think I was part of that equation. you know.
Wow. Wow. Okay. Anything else you want to share before we end here?
Oh yeah, sure. I've got a couple more hours of notes here. I
Oh,
mean,
okay.
really,
Do a little time shifting.
I mean, tons of stuff. It was totally fun. But you get the point. I want everybody to get that point about the numbers, and there's prime numbers and resonances of all the numbers and
Mhm.
proportions that are musical found everywhere. Everywhere
Mhm.
I've looked, I found musical ratios everywhere, whether it made a melody or it was just two notes or it was a whole chord, like with the weather harmonics, it makes like a C major sixth chord, things like
Mhm.
that. That's fascinating to connect. I think that's part of Life 101 is to understand the creator's music for the universe.
And it brings you into a zone when you understand it and
It
really
does.
feel it.
Just working on it, I get high like I'm on something
Hmm.
besides oxygen. I mean, I'm grooving along. I get to doing this. I stay up all night sometimes doing it because it puts me in a different zone. And then when I'm in that zone, I get ideas. Look at this, try this.
Hmm.
Things that maybe I wasn't thinking in my regular average brainwave, whatever that is.
You know where this really becomes applicable is in your living space.
Mm-hmm.
And whatever objects you're actually working with, when they're actually designed based on these harmonies, it's a whole different life force, right?
Absolutely. I got them all over the place, hanging from the ceilings, on the walls, you know, sacred altars all over the place with different geometries, color patterns. I live in that. And so that helps me do this work because I'm
And
surrounded by those harmonic patterns.
and they should really build buildings. So they calculate the ratios between the left and right, front, back, and ceiling to floor to see what.
Yeah, and like in Isfahan in Iran, there's a temple there that when the musicians play music, the echo lasts for half an hour,
Wow.
and the royal couple, the musicians leave, the royal couple comes in, and through all that echoing for a half an hour, they get a private concert. That whole
Mhm.
place was designed from sound. And there are lots of them like that around the world. And a lot of the ones that are churches, like Gothic churches, were not built for religious ceremonies. They were totally built for sound and plasma energy and free energy and electricity. They had the domes were all part of the technology, and the spires are part of the technology, what they're made of, the proportions of it, what they resonate to, all of that stuff, both for energies, like working with plasma, because they had electricity way back then when those were built. I mean, like we have electricity, and then something happened where a lot of that stuff got buried,
Hmm.
which is too bad because we're rediscovering that now. Like in studying those churches and all in Tartaria and in all different countries, the Russian ones, and they were not built for religious ceremonies. They were built for sound resonances and healing and free energy.
And it
Because
ultimately all comes from nature itself.
absolutely. But
Yeah.
how to tap into nature in order
Hmm.
to get the energy you need for something. So it
Hmm.
is in nature, it's been in nature, but you have to know how to dial into it, right? Without Edison, without PG&E, right?
That's kind of probably the
Because they can
most.
put a meter on it. See, that's what they were addicted to, putting a meter and charging people.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. That's kind of the most important thing of all is it's once we get back reconnected to nature, then not only is there more harmony and health, but the creativity kind of goes off the deep end.
Totally. And has these frequencies run through us for healing purposes, for whatever we're doing, light. Yeah, I mean, I've had all kinds of lights come out of me. Not because I had a switch and turned it on. And something
Where
came.
did they come out of you?
One time they came out of my eyes. A
Really?
blue light lit up the whole room, a dark room, totally lit up the room. And I wasn't trying to do that, you know. So that was out of love because I was hanging out with my girlfriend at the time. So, what can I say? You know. But it lit up the room. She got
Oh my
spooked. She thought she was with an alien. Thanks a lot. How many guys have you dated in your life that have blue light coming out of their eyes? Right.
God.
Oh my God.
Oh my God. Cool. Okay, well, we're about out of time. Anything you want to end with?
Well, just the prayers that people can get with the program, with the creator's program, which
Mhm.
is musical, which is sound and free, just like what Tesla was talking about,
Mhm.
sounds and wavelengths and frequencies and different ways of measuring it. But ultimately, it all comes back to that essence that makes music work. And to me, it's a musical universe.
It's really interesting because it makes me think of the music. If I create music, there's certain things where it just feels like spirit has taken over the melody
Yes.
and rhythm, right? And it just flows so perfectly because, and it's a very specific mathematical progression of the melody and rhythm. Right? Exactly. And whereas as opposed to some music where people are like, oh, if we do this, and use this chord and this chord, we do something cool. And that's, then it's kind of like coming out of the mind instead of the ratios within nature.
Yeah. And the creator using your body as the instrument,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
you know, to make sure you press the right buttons or whatever you do, or strike the right instruments. the rhythm of when you hit the bells, how fast and what you do with the crystal bowls and gongs. You can turn yourself over to that flow and let the creator play you.
Oh, you can feel it when it happens, when people do it too. It's
Yeah,
drastically different. And then all of a sudden, sometimes the ceiling opens up and purple light pours in. It's like, holy moly.
yeah, it's nice, isn't it? Yeah. Except when I get mole, it's kind of a chocolate color. No, I haven't gotten any purple or
Yeah, yeah,
or
it's only the holy moly.
the holy moly. Yeah,
Right.
very interesting. But the
Right.
colors involved. But in spite of that, the chocolate thing, using brown light for grounding is very important.
Mm,
Most people don't deal with the brown light.
hmm
They deal with all different colors of chakras and other type of
mm,
things. But from the below the root chakra down to the feet, using brown light helps for grounding.
mm, mm.
I mean, have you
It,
seen brown light being used for anything in any light shows ever?
mm.
Yeah, interesting, huh?
In my movie, which is actually Close Encounters 2, we're working on, it's like, we have all geometry in the world that goes out and forms all of the universe. And the final line of the movie is, if you want to see any music in the world, just look up at the sky. And there's love there.
Yeah, it's best when that's where it's coming from. You know,
Thank you for all your work you do and
thank
your
you, David, for
10,000 years of research. And
well, hopefully, out of all of that, we had some things here that will be useful and fun for people and will inspire them. And so that's my prayer for that, for
perfect.
our dialogue and talk. I always enjoy it when we do this a lot, big time, for whatever effect it's going to have on people. I'd like to hear about it if it had some kind of effect,
Cool.
If you
Cool.
hear anything interesting, let me know.
Okay.
Because it's interesting in here and in here.
Uh-huh.
Oh, blessings to everybody for that. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
All right. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you
Okay.
in a little bit.
Okay.
Here.
Take care.
Yeah. Bye bye.